Kiss My Chaos. Taking stories of trauma into triumph while living life in the middle and everything in between. All views are expressed solely of the host, guests, and for entertainment purposes only. You don't like it? Well, you can kiss our chaos. Here are your hosts, Abigail Dark and D.T. Hudson.
It's the Kiss My Chaos podcast, and we're very, very, very lucky today because we're sitting with royalty. Oh, look at you. Somebody's wearing a literal crown. Where'd you get that?
Well, I'm glad you finally acknowledge it.
I know, I did.
My husband doesn't think I'm a queen. At least my podcast partner does.
Not getting involved in that. Don't put me in the middle of that at all. Don't want to be part of it.
I love you, Andy.
I do too, Andy. Nice new guitar, Andy. Oh, what? No, I'm just kidding.
Better not have a new guitar. This crown is going to go somewhere else.
Oh, and it's a big crown.
It is a big crown.
It's going to go in the other crown.
You told me it was indestructible, so
I didn't say indestructible. I said if you drove over it with a car, it'll probably break, but you're not going to break it because the wind's blowing. So.
Well, that's true.
I'm a 3D printer, so I 3D printed her a crown and a skull and a crown for the skull. And yeah, I've been a little loco with the 3D printing lately. Keeps me out of trouble. We have a very special, quiet guest in the corner, like a little mouse, a little badger, perhaps. And she said, I'm going to put my phone on silent. I'm not going to chime in too much because it'll echo. Oh, she's biting her nails over there. Yep, there she goes.
There she is.
Couldn't hold off. I tell you what, last week I will speak for myself, have received numerous comments on our last podcast. It was clearly very impactful for many people because they've been reaching out, and it was really eye-opening. And what we wanted to do was make it as raw as possible and protect the sanctity of individuals and their success and their recovery. And hopefully we did that. And I appreciate everybody that has reached out and asked really valid questions, wanting to ask more questions. And I encourage people to, put something in a DM, put something in the comments on our Facebook page or any other social media platform. And I can guarantee you, any one of our guests would be happy to answer those questions, specifically with last week. But sitting through this for several months, we think about addiction, we think about recovery, but sometimes we forget everybody involved. And this, again, is another courageous thing that I don't know if I'd be able to do. How about we take the father who walked this journey and stood beside a son to get them where they're at now? It's not only the definition to me of love, it's the definition of respect, it's the definition of resilience.
There are so many parents out there that wonder, what would I do if it was my kid? Or if you are maybe even in that situation right now where you feel like your kid is just too far gone. They don't listen to you. You don't know what else to do. They're so addicted, or maybe you don't even know where they're at. Or, maybe it's something as simple as cigarettes or, marijuana, where it leads to. So the last one, we talked to him a lot about, what influenced him into getting into the drugs and into getting into it more. Could the parents have done something differently? I wanted to take that perspective, especially since I knew we had our guest today, because it is nice to see the perspective from child to father, to see the differences in how they viewed the addiction.
So with that being said, we have the father of our last week's guest to get a parent's perspective on what was going on. There's always two sides to every story. There's two sides to a sword, and both can be very deadly and cut both ways, but they can also heal. And that's what this is about, is healing and a journey that ultimately they walk together, and both have found success and hopefully a little bit of peace. So welcome Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we, what we do is the title of our last podcast was Addiction is Faceless. This is also faceless. It doesn't matter who the individual is. This is the story and this is the journey. And we're going to put our feet in somebody else's boots for a little while. So thank you for coming here. It takes incredible, I said it last week, I like to say it, incredible balls. We're dealing with guys. I can say balls. It takes incredible balls to do it because, what's the goal of this?
To raise awareness and to help people understand where people go through or what they go through.
Okay.
It's kind of, for me, this is, you said there's two sides to every story.
Yeah.
I think there's three sides. There's the one side, the other side, and then the truth. And I hope I can get as close to the truth on this as I can, but I'm sure I have my own bias in this in places.
That's all right. That's what we do here. It's to get your truth, right? And one of the interesting, I'm going to laugh a little bit because I have to ask you, have you listened to last week's podcast?
I listened to it, yes.
Okay. Well, you weren't supposed to. No, I'm no, it's all right.
I was not gonna. I was really gonna try not to listen to it, but I had heard part of it when we were doing some other things, and
sure.
I wanted to hear the full thing because the way he told the story was really impressive to me. So
okay, great. Well, let's start with that. What we started with him was, and it's hard. It's like where it began. At what point, as a parent, did you start realizing, hey, this isn't something that I experienced growing up, or maybe I did experience it, but maybe not directly. Maybe I saw it in somebody else. Was there a specific point, or was it something gradual that eased?
I want to say that I would be a great parent and that I could see everything. And I will tell you, it didn't hit me. I believed my son was innocent and was doing the right thing, and it was going to all work out throughout almost all of it. And it wasn't until he actually moved away and lived somewhere else, and I was sitting in a men's group, and somebody came up to me that happened to be with law enforcement and asked me how my son was doing. And
it's got to be a little weird.
When he used his name, I knew he didn't know him. Like, I've never talked about him with this group directly. And he goes, no, we've had your house on our radar for quite a while. And that started to open my eyes to, wait a minute, there's a lot more going on here than what I want to believe. And I'll have to say, I was so oblivious at that point that I didn't know what the black stains on the tops of the dressers were, or in the bathroom that I couldn't get off the sink.
What were they?
Heroin.
Okay.
Black tar heroin. And I wish I could say that I wasn't that oblivious, but I grew up in a time in a place that was very secure. How should I say this? He told a story about generational curses, and I pray to God that this generational curse can end with him. Because as much as I want to say that it's not passed down, a lot of this stuff is passed down. And it's not due to the fault of the parent. The parents are doing the best they can with what they have. And I look back on my dad, and I look at how he was involved, but he also was very absent in a lot of things. He loved me, he provided, but he also didn't teach me what being a man meant. And I think he did in his own way, but I don't think he knew what that was either, because he had to find it on his own. And so I look back on a lot of this, and I'm surprised that it's worked out as well as it has. But I will say there was a lot of hard work that went into it. I recognize patterns back in, I don't know, it's probably been 15 to 18 years ago. I started realizing that I was absent in my own mind. I was checked out. I was passive, and I wasn't being the man that I was meant to be. And I started with the new men's group at church back then, and started realizing that. And I knew that I needed more, and I started going to counseling back then. And I'll tell you, since then, I don't think there hasn't been a time that I've not gone to counseling. I've probably been to 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 different counselors between now and then, because I knew that I didn't know what I didn't know, and I knew that my brain was misfiring in a couple places, and I was not an addict. I was not using anything. I was dealing with life. I was dealing with money. I was dealing with family. I was dealing with my extended family being distant, and as much as I want to believe good in some of that, I wanted more than what we had. I wasn't getting it from anywhere, so I was looking to myself. And I grew up in a place where expectation met, trying to think the word.
Was it like a reward based?
No, it was more like, I can't think of the word.
That's fine. We can come back to that. But
Yeah. Anyway, I guilt based. That's the word I'm looking for. You know why I couldn't think of that?
don't feel guilty.
I just, it was, I remember one time when I was growing up, I was not the saint of a child either.
He's laughing right now.
I feel like we could have a separate podcast of stories.
Yeah, probably.
Yes, we could. But there was one time, so this is just to give some background to how I grew up and how discipline worked for me in my youth. I started driving at a very young age, and I mean like 9, like a lot of kids on farms. And I was driving trucks by 11, semis by 12 or 13, and driving them to town. Like, it was not. And so when I was 14 or 15, I was coming back from a trip somewhere. We were all drinking in the car. Well, we weren't all drinking. I was not drinking. I was driving, but my buddies were, and they threw it out the window when the cop came by. And we got a bunch of tickets. And when I got home, all I did was like, I can't believe you do something like that. And that was about it. And then the next day I'm walking out to the truck, and we were going to go somewhere, my dad and I, and he walks out and he sits in the car, and I start backing up, and he goes, I can't believe you're going to let me do this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he picks up a beer in his hand, and he goes, you were going to let me drive in the car with you. I told you can't let anybody do that again. And I'm like, well, that's a little low. Like, you're my dad. Like, I think you're, but that's the way it kind of worked. And
that's kind of a setup for failure.
It is. And so I was guilted into a lot of things. I wasn't hit as a kid. I wasn't, yelled at too much. My dad liked to yell a lot. I learned every swear word I think I know from my dad. And it wasn't intentional. He didn't swear at us, but when something went wrong, you could hear him across the yard yelling and swearing and throwing stuff. So, love my dad. I'm not trying to say anything bad about him.
No.
He's not here with us anymore, but to miss him. So, anyway, moving on to when I was my child or my kids were young, I noticed there were times where he said in his podcast, he said I was an absent father. And he is absolutely right. I was on the road at least every other week, and I would travel for the whole week at the time. I'd sometimes leave Sunday morning, get back Saturday night. And it was for work. I was doing what I thought I had to do as a father to provide, and which I was not doing well at financially. We were struggling, and it was a lot. And there was a lot of times I'd come home, and all I would hear is, it works better when you're gone. And so I would get even more passive. I would stop trying to interact because I upset the apple cart. I would make things different at home. And so he was very right in when he said I was absent. Even when I was home, I would try to love, but I wouldn't be really engaged. And so I started to believe a lot of good things. My son was an absolute wonderful child. I mean, he was my pride and joy. He was so fun. He was always for the underdog. He always fought for the little guy. He's had a heart of gold his whole life. And I remember as a kid, he didn't like fighting when he was little. And when he was in middle school, he had two friends. They were actually twins. fraternal twins, but they were twins, and they had two older brothers, and he'd go over there and play, and I didn't realize what was going on, but he was getting his butt kicked by these four guys, and the two older ones were quite older, but he would come home and go out on the trampoline, and he had a body pillow, and he would go out and do these wrestling moves on this body pillow, and he would have kind of just hours of just doing this. And I was like, he must really love, and they ended up going to John Cena and the WWE. And I thought that was what it was all about, until one day, something happened at the school where somebody was bullying a friend of his, a girl. And he was a lot smaller than this guy, was standing up for this girl. And anyway, my son was standing up for this girl, and he was just watching this guy, and this guy thought he was just joking with him. And I think they became friends afterwards, but he put him in this headlock and dropped him to the ground, and I think broke his nose because it was bleeding and running away. And that's just who he was, that he stood up for people all the time. In the fight, he was always protecting the ones that were vulnerable.
I think they call that, being a professional wrestling fan myself, a DDT. That very effective.
I have no idea. I was never into that, but
He talked a lot about his empathy.
yes,
And a lot of the drugs really removed that piece. I think seeing that correlation with you talking a little bit about how you wanted, in your head, you were trying to be a little more absent. Well, you didn't use drugs to do that. You were able to naturally kind of, with your job and other things, that just kind of came.
very true.
Where he utilized the drugs from the chemical imbalance. So seeing that father to son piece of it is very interesting, hearing the story coming out.
And I remember him saying the word absent, and it's up to him what that definition is. But there's always the reality of providing too. You have to, you're in a situation, you have to provide, or you don't. I mean, it's one or the other.
Well, it was fun to hear him say that. I shouldn't say fun, but it was interesting to hear him say that on the podcast, that now that he's in a different place and he's got a baby dog, I think he called it, and he's got responsibility, that he can see where that came from.
Sure.
I will say that my drug was probably passivity. The more I got beat down, I didn't have a friend group where I lived at that time. I had moved away from family, moved away from what I knew, and was just trying to find my way. And what I didn't realize is that my passivity, or my absence, and that really drove the problems in the home. As much as I would love to say that I didn't have any reason why my relationship with his mom didn't work out and why we're all in different places, I'm pretty sure that I had a lot to do with that. And it wasn't because I didn't try, but it was because I wasn't active in it. I kind of let it happen without directing it, not being the leader of the home like I should have been, as I walked in my faith and seen what God's plan is for a family. I was definitely not that plan. I was definitely something different. And
Important to say, though, that it's not your fault. And to say, and
It's
you
not.
may view it as being your fault, but I think anybody that has been an addict or knows an addict knows that the way that they viewed the world of the time that it was happening, there might not have been anything that you could have done differently that might have changed the outcome of what was happening. Whether you were a strict father, there are strict fathers with addicts for children. There are perfect fathers that have addicts for children. So to say that this was the catalyst, we're not saying that on this podcast. We're saying that this is the situation that you had and how your son viewed his household of you being absent.
right.
You weren't in the home all week, you were working, but you weren't an absent father. You loved your son.
Absolutely, I loved my son, and I wasn't saying that I wasn't trying to love my son.
Right.
Hindsight being 2020, and sitting here in this chair today, looking back on everything, I can tell you with a lot of confidence that had I been intentional, at least in what I did, and I'm going to tell you a story about how this walked through this later, but I'll just put it as if I would have met them where they were in the moment, instead of thinking they were everything that they were going to be. I don't know how to say that. I just knew my son was going to be successful, but I didn't think it was going to come with as much challenge. And as a father, I should have taken a more intentional role to get him through those times so they weren't quite as up and down. And being where we are now, there is nothing that makes me happier than seeing my son now. And going through what we did was the hardest thing that I've ever done. And I would almost say that my absentee or passivity as a father helped me get through that, because I had to have some boundaries. And in my brain, I sometimes had to put up that boundary of, I don't know where he is. I don't know if I'll ever see him again. I don't know if he's going to live to see tomorrow. And is the next phone call I get going to be that he's not here anymore? And there's a lot of things that I had to do to get through that and still maintain a life and keep living, doing work, doing life. And it was not as easy as I sometimes say it is. I think I've had conversations with people, and they said, I don't know how you did it. And sometimes I don't either, but I also look back and I'm like, no, I kind of do know, because he's my son. And as a father loves his son, you would go to the ends of the earth if you had to do anything for your son or your daughter or anything, any kid, but just in this case, my son.
It's interesting you say that, because you think of, and I'm sure we'll get into this, some of the things that you found yourself doing now that you sit in a chair and you talk about hindsight. And yes, it is 2020. It's like, do you feel, I mean, just in your opinion, it's actually made your bond with your son stronger?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
100%.
Explain that a little bit. How's that occur?
We went through a lot of hard times. The day that person said they had my house under surveillance, I started realizing I had to ask more questions. I started realizing that there was more going on here. And now I started digging into little things. I mean, not that I was trying to be invasive, but I had paid for his phone, so I would track where he was once in a while.
You have to be a little bit invasive at that point.
And I just, to see if it ever moved again. Like, it wasn't to say, are you doing good or bad things, but are you still alive? And if I have to go do something, where am I going?
How old was he at that time? Approximately.
So I want to say he was around 15 when we lived together, just him and I, in an apartment. And when he moved away to live with his mom is when I found all this out.
Okay.
And so he was probably 16 at that point.
Gotcha. Young man.
Young. And I still believe the best of him. Like, I've always given him the benefit of the doubt because he's my kid. As much as I wanted him to not go through that, I also knew that he had something more within him. And it wasn't ever that I wanted to tell him he was doing anything wrong, but I also had to give him a way to see what right was. And that's a very hard thing to do, is not tell your kids the right way to do something, because they're never going to listen. And so he had been into some pretty heavy stuff, heard a lot of stories from his mom, and he ended up overdosing. The first time that I knew of, ended up in a hospital and ended up going to treatment. And I remember talking to the intake people, because they needed money, of course. There's a lot of money that goes on to the treatment side of things in a lot of these facilities. And there were some comments made that made me understand that people believed that the parents were the reason. And in a lot of cases, that's true. And in a lot of cases, there are choices made on both sides. But it made me think how much of this was me, and how much do I need to talk about this in my own mind, not in anybody else's. But as I was working through all the counseling that I've been through, it wasn't to fix me, but it was to help me understand maybe the rights and wrongs of what I should be thinking, and what was good and what was not so good in my life, and finding out the traumas that happened. There were things that happened to me in a young age that I had to grow up really fast. When I was about 14 or 15, my parents got injured and were in the hospital for 7 weeks. And I ended up living at home alone with my sisters. And I was barely old enough to drive. I mean, I had my license for I got it at 14 and 3 months. And it was probably 14 and 6 months that this happened. And so I was buying groceries, cooking dinners. I mean, we did have a lot of food coming over. Don't get me wrong. People brought stuff over. But it was a very big time of growth. Like, it was about the same time that I started working on my own and running my own business, which is farming. I kind of grew up way too fast and wasn't ready for it. But I thought it was expected. And so I kind of thought the same thing, I think, and I think it, like we talked generational things, that's the way I envisioned things for him too. And he was about the right age now. I think it's time for him to grow up. And I don't think I was intentionally thinking that, but I look back on it and I think, that's the way it was. I guess it's about time. And I didn't know, but having gone to counseling and been sitting in that for so long, and talking about it and learning what I didn't understand, when he went to treatment and then things went south out of that treatment, and he ended up out doing things that were even more involved than he was before,
Are those things like the things to support the habit post-treatment?
Yeah, all the things he talked about.
Okay.
I don't want to talk about it because it's his story.
Yep.
I ended up in another state, and I had to meet him where he was. I knew that as a father, I couldn't enable him. I did help him as much as I could. I gave him access to my Uber family rideshare or whatever that was, and he could get rides if he needed, but then at least I knew he was somewhere. I knew where he was. And we were across the country at this point. I was in a different part of the country. He was in a different part of the country. So it wasn't like I could drive over and get him if I needed to. This was halfway across the country. And so I made a plan to go meet him where he was, and I wanted to see who my son was. And he had left from where we lived together, and I was oblivious to all this, to the point where I started seeing it and understanding that he was in deep. And he would call me and tell me some things about what was going on, and I truly didn't think he was going to make it. And I mean make it, I thought he'd be dead. Not so much even from the drugs. It was from the people he was hanging out with. And I knew that if I really wanted to be a father to him, I had to meet him where he was, and see who he was. I know it sounds a little strange maybe, but my faith took me to a place where God says, come as you are. You don't need to be fixed to meet me. And I wanted him to see God in that way. I remember about 10, 15 years ago, I had recommitted my life to Christ, and I was baptized in a church with my men's group and my buddies. And it was a fairly good-sized church, and it was a pretty great experience. But the day that happened is kind of a background that I feel like might have been part of the protection had on him in all the things he went through. The day that I was baptized, I told him I was going up there, and he was probably all of 11 or 12, maybe, give or take. And he goes, "Dad, I want to do that." I said, "You want to get baptized?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, you can come up if you want." And he did, and he went and got baptized that day. And I'll tell you, I don't know, but I think God had his hand on him through a lot of circumstances. The story he told about the warehouse and there was no reason he lived that day. So I believe there was a much bigger influence in this than anybody else could talk about.
We were talking about your son getting baptized, and that's a pretty impressive thing, and that's a very profound thing in a person's spiritual journey.
Absolutely. And I think I was just thinking about, as he was telling that part of the story, that I have a son, and at what point in your son's addiction, when he was talking about, he's like, "Yeah, I just left because I didn't want to, hurt the people that I love. I didn't want to see them get hurt." So in his head, that's how he justifies it. But as a parent, I think a lot of us parents are probably thinking it like, why would you let him leave?
That's a good question. I think there were times I've had conversations with him. So let me tell you a different story.
Sure.
Of where I was going, and then maybe we can answer that question. So we talked about the baptism, but when I was talking about being a father and meeting him where he was at, and it's kind of how you talk about finding your faith. You get met where you're at. You don't have to get clean to be loved by your father, right?
Right.
And that's what I finally realized, was that I had to meet him where he was and know who my son was. He's not what I imagined he was. He is who he is. And I flew to another place, and I met him there, him and his other old significant other. And from the moment I saw and met her, I was trying to talk him out of being around her. She was very bad for him. But he saved her in a way, like literally probably saved her life. And he had made a commitment, and knowing me and knowing him, where he comes from, I understood when you make a commitment, you follow through on that. And he did. But I will say, when I went out to see him, it was not easy. When we first started, I will say I had to set some boundaries, and I had to make them simple, because if you don't know about addiction, people, their brain doesn't work the same way as a lot of other people's brains do. They don't think full thoughts, and it was hard to communicate, and they were very quick to change in their mindsets and topics. And so there were only 2 rules I ever set for him, and it was, you can't hit me, and you can't steal from me. I said, you ever do one of those things, I'll be the first person to turn you in. And so I said, take that one to the bank. You will go to jail if you do either one of those 2 things with me. I will love you through anything, but you do either one of those 2 things, I will be the first person to take you to jail. And he knew that I was serious on that one. Many times he wanted to, because he was a fighter. He's a scrapper, like he talked about in his. He was a kickboxer. He liked those things, and he took it to that place very frequently. But he never did with me. So anyway, I met him where he was, watched him do things. I mean, I went to the store with him and asked him what he wanted, and I was going to buy him stuff, and he let me buy him a couple things, and then we get out to the car, and he takes all the shit out of his pockets that he had stolen while he was in there. And I'm like, dude.
It's a mindset. It's a
Yeah,
lifestyle.
that's when I knew I was dealing with something. And I knew I was way over my head. And I couldn't fix it with a couple of words. And so I walked with him for 10 days. Was staying in hotel rooms, and because I wanted to know, I stayed in the same hotel rooms with him and his girlfriend. I've never witnessed drug use till then. There was other things that went on in that room that I never wanted to be a part of or hear, but I truly met my son where he was and learned what he was going through. And had I tried to correct him, I think he would have ran. And all I wanted to do was walk with him.
Sure.
And just say, well, that's probably not what I would do, is the way I went about it. The short version. You had to have conversations in a different way. And I thought I got through to him. That's what I meant. And thought he was going to come with me home. And absolutely said he was. And I was sitting at the airport flying home that day and texted him, and he said, I'm not going to make it. And so I hadn't bought a ticket or anything, but kind of deflated me a little bit because I was hoping I got through to him. And I knew that. And then after conversations now in the future, he goes, Dad, I never planned on leaving. He goes, I was just an addict telling you what you wanted to hear.
Let me get this absolutely 100% clear and straight. You have a father whose son is an addict. He takes the time to meet him where he's at. Literally meet him where he's at and walk in his shoes for 10 days or so. That is astounding to me. And you seem like a humble guy. You probably don't understand how incredible that is to be able to do that, to try and understand what's happening and potentially so you can fix it or help fix it or be part of it. You're a father that went wherever to go a place you probably don't want to go and have no idea. That's very courageous. And that to me is a true father's love for a son. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Wow.
To get back to your question though, about why he
changes the subject right away.
No,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I don't want this to be about me.
Mm-mm.
You asked how he could leave and why I didn't ask him to stay. I put myself in that situation where he was at that point. In those 10 days I was there. Okay, I'll take that back. I was with him for 10 days. Not all 10 of those days were in the same place. We went to another city or two and kind of got away from where he was at. I had some friends that I wanted to go visit and try to show what having friends that were really true friends are.
You're trying to show him that there are different ways or different types of people out there than the ones he was hanging around.
Right. I had a buddy that much younger than me, but we had gotten very close. And I was hoping that him seeing somebody that's successful outside of anything I could show him. And it was kind of disappointing because the day we went over there, he decided he couldn't go. He was just actually probably too high. And I didn't want to put my friend's family in that situation. Anyway, to your point, I went into that situation, and for most of half of that time out there, at least give or take some, there was a high likelihood I was putting myself in a place where people that wanted him probably dead, and would have found him, I would have been there with him. I knew that, and I made that choice, but he absolutely couldn't and wouldn't do that for anyone else in his family. There was a couple of scares, I'm sure, where he had gotten people too close to maybe his sister or his mom that could have held something against him through them. And in the story he told about his friend's father, absolutely, possibly could have happened to anyone in his family. So I understood why he was, and I truly wasn't going to stop him from doing that, because he's the one that was making those choices. As much as you want to save your kids, like I said, there was only 2 rules I had for him, and that was it. And had he broken those rules, he would have severed ties with me until he was done and ready to accept at least those 2 rules. He did mention throughout all of this, there were many contracts him and I had. I probably still have them in writing in some folder somewhere. And the counselor thought I was crazy at one of his drug facilities, his addiction facilities, for writing this. And I made that counselor sign it with him. And there was money outlined. There was all sorts of stuff. He's never fulfilled those contracts, and I'm not holding him to it. So, but it was something to make him sign on the dotted line to say Dad loves him and he wants him to make good choices. But it was never there to say you owe me something.
Accountability.
Yeah. And so I don't want anybody taking away from this that I encourage people writing contracts with your kids. That's not what I'm saying.
It had gotten to that point for you.
Well, and that was long after the story I was talking about.
Right.
After that, I left, came back here probably 2 months later. He ended up in jail. And to remember taking video phone calls and trying to find ways to put money on their prison account or their jail account. I don't want to call it prison. He was in a prison at that time. It was a bad place.
I think it's a commissary account.
It is, but his phone and all of that.
Right.
It was very hard to do that. But all I wanted was connection with him. It wasn't about anything other than, hey, I'm here for you. Are you okay? Are you gonna anything? It's funny the things that you encourage them for. The stories he would tell about the life inside of what he saw there, and the wins of how you'd build him up for the things that he had to struggle through there. You find, I don't know, you probably heard that, but when they say that your wife should compliment you as a husband, even if you have your shirt unbuttoned or buttoned wrong, that, hey, you got it buttoned, to kind of build you up a little bit. It was kind of that life that I was trying to say, hey, you did a couple things right here, and it was hard because you want to say all the things that you're screwing up on, that you're not making good choices. And he knows those things. He knows exactly where he's at. He used to explain it as there's a line, and there's people that want to succeed above the line, and there's people that want to succeed below the line, and you can get as wealthy and as influential as you want below and above the line. And a lot of people stay about at the line. And he said, in my life at that point, I wanted to become the influential person below the line. And he was working that direction. And I worked to keep him above the line. It's probably the only way I can explain that. Well, he got out of that and ended up back on the streets. And one day called me and needed a ride. And it was a very long ride, very expensive ride. But he was fearing for his life at this point. And I could hear it in his voice. I always knew he was a scrapper. I knew he could take care of himself. But he was afraid that day. And so I'm like, whatever you need. And shortly thereafter, I went and, well, leading up to that, he overdosed again. And his mom called me and said, I can't do anything anymore with this. You need to come out and basically, I don't know, make him believe something. So again, I flew out somewhere and got a room in a hotel. And for most of it, him and his mom, and then him and his girlfriend at this time stayed there for the whole week. And I was still just trying to meet him where he was, and he wasn't listening. And in this time, he was watching his back the whole time we were there. And now I found out that there were people looking for him in this hotel while we were there, and we were really kind of being surveilled in a way. But I remember...
We're not talking police. We're talking...
No, we're talking bad people.
Okay.
People below the line, not above the line.
There you go.
Right.
And he... close to the end of the time I was going to stay, I wasn't going to stay for more than a week. And I was probably a day and a half before I left. And something weird happened. I don't want to tell the story, but he went off on me over something really small. And I don't know whether it was addiction that caused that, or something in his mind, or him not wanting to deal with what we had been talking about. But we were sitting at dinner, and he went off and ran upstairs and was packing up his stuff to go back on the streets. And I walked in the room, and I pretty much blew up on him. I'm like, I'm done with this. If you want to die, you can die. But I said, you're hurting everyone else around you. And we went at it for yelling for probably a good hour and a half at the top of our lungs. I am so surprised that the police were not called, because we were, and he was in my face, nose to nose, and his hands were up, and he was ready to hit me. And I had my hands in my back pocket, because if I would have even flinched a little, he probably would have thrown. And I didn't want him going to jail that night, but I absolutely told him, you don't want to do this. You know my 2 rules. And I kept those 2 rules, and he was, I mean, I could feel the heat of his breath. Like, it was that close. And his mom was over there wanting me to back off. And I'm like, this is what you called me here for. I said, this ain't going any other way, but he's either leaving and dying, or we're going to fix this right now. Which was never going to happen. Like, you don't fix this overnight. But I mean, we went so long that he actually wore out. Like, he ran out of energy, or came off his high. I'm not quite sure. Something. I had to go to bed. I was worn out. We wake up and the sun's coming up, and all I hear is him say, Dad, I want to come with you. Well, I don't know if I should say that. Come back to where I live. And I'm like, absolutely. And he goes, but one condition, she has to come with. And I said, no, that's
Who's
not
she? Mom?
his girlfriend.
Okay.
And I said, absolutely not. I said, you come, you two are no good for each other.
This is the same girlfriend.
Same girlfriend.
Okay.
Before you left, though, did you ever, like you said, he was looking behind his back all the time. Did you ever fear for your life, or were you so concerned about his?
I didn't know what was going on at the time.
Okay.
This was told to me after the fact. He told me, hey, remember when we were pulling out of that? There was somebody coming around the corner. We're just lucky we got out of there in time. And yeah. So I had no idea at the time. And I don't know. Anyway, back to I said, I'll buy you both the plane ticket if I can get it for less than X dollars. I don't remember the numbers, but it was pretty low, like $250 for both of them. Like, I was like, this is never going to happen. And I go on and find a plane ticket for $173 or some number for both of them. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, wow.
Careful with what you
Right?
Divine intervention.
And I don't know if it would have gone right or not had she come or not come. It's all hindsight, but I do believe that he was still working through stuff and had to deal with it. So maybe that was God's hand in saying, you got to do this right now. And he did come with. We all went to the airport at the same time, actually put him and her on a plane, and they took off. I got on another plane, went back. I got back before they did. They had a hell of a flight with like three stops or four because of the ticket I bought. So
use a passport for $173 ticket these days.
For two tickets. Two one-way tickets.
It's even worse. All you JetBlue fans out there.
This was not JetBlue. And picked him up at the airport and said a couple of ground rules, but nothing major. Of course, it was implied they don't do drugs. And had to get a job. He was working through some community service he had to do, so we were getting that. That was his first thing to get done, so he didn't end up getting recalled back to where he was. I don't know what that's called, extradited or something. Whatever it's called. I just was like, I don't want you leaving, so let's get this done. And about 2 weeks, maybe 3 passed. I'd already found a new apartment I had a 1-bedroom at the time, so they were living in the living room on the floor on an air mattress, and probably the most he'd lived in one spot for a while. And she got a job. They were working, trying to get things straightened out. And about 2.5 weeks, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks in, I walk out to my living room at midnight and they're smoking a bowl of probably heroin, I think it was. And I kind of just fell apart in my head. And I said, well, you have 2 choices. You can either dump that out, stay here till morning, and I'll take you to treatment, or you can go to the bus stop. It's right out there. Pack your shit, get out. And I said, I'll give you 5 minutes to think about it. And I went back in my room, and I heard the toilet flush. I know he didn't flush whatever he had. He told me that later. And but he did say he would do that and go to treatment in the morning. And I said, okay. So we got up in the morning, and it was a hell of a fight. He was on board for the treatment. I know he wanted to get better. Her, on the other hand, she went crazy. I've never seen someone go psychotic this much in my life. I have probably a video of it that I look back on and I just can't believe, because I was like, this isn't real. And ended up taking him to treatment, and I asked her where she wanted to go to treatment, and she said, I don't know. And I said, well, you got to make a choice. You can't stay with me. You've got to find something. And she said, well, I have a friend in Pittsburgh. I said, perfect. I'll put you on a plane. And so I put her on a plane to Pittsburgh, and it's like, good riddance. We're good.
You're welcome, Pittsburgh.
Yep.
Problem? 2 weeks later, she talked some other guy to pay her ticket to get back there. Asked to leave treatment. That was his second treatment. That was my son's second treatment. And it was, he talked about it in his podcast about money.
As far as the treatment facility.
The treatment.
Yeah, he's pretty specific.
They didn't have any room right away.
No, this one they did.
Oh, this one.
This one was
before that.
This one was very nice facility. I would call it more like a country club than I would have a facility of treatment. I think it was where very wealthy people send their problems, is what I would call it.
Yeah, and we don't need to name it. I think we have.
No. I'm not going to, but it was that kind of facility, and I don't have that kind of money. And luckily, there was money from places within the place he was that he could be there. but it was only for a couple weeks. And I remember the day that I drove special back down there to see him. And I called to make sure everything was good still for a meeting, and talked with some people at the facility. And they said, no, he's gone. He checked out, left. And I was pretty disappointed because I knew why. And that was the beginning of a couple really hard years of things, because it was during a time when COVID was coming on, things were happening, lots of issues with the world. And we were back at it. We were back into the same place where I was worried for him.
Seems to me it's been 2 steps forward and 10 back, and then a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, or maybe a reprieve.
I wish I could say it was that way. I would say it was more like 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Gotcha.
Not that he was in bad places. He was, but now it's become, when he talked about the life he was in and why he got into it, he was very smart about it then and made it more, let's call it a business. His addiction was part of a business. When he moved with me, it became an addiction that he tried to keep a business life, and he couldn't. And so I was more fearful now at this point than I was before, which is strange because there was a lot of other things coming at him, but I think his brain was in a better place. And
as a father, it seems like you'd have just an ounce more control. I mean, eyes on when your eyes are on, but then all of a sudden that control's immediately snatched away.
Control is a tough word. I'm not putting it down, but I never once ever thought I had any control. Okay. I might have had influence. Might have.
Maybe that's a better word, is influence.
Might have.
Okay.
I think control over an addict is
they run.
Yeah, you make it worse. The more you try to control someone who has an addiction or who wants to be more a part of that addiction, it just drives it.
And I think it's what the world tries to do is put boxes around addiction. And
explain that a little bit.
People want to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
No one else can fix it. We put addicts in boxes because we don't know. And that's where I was. I put him in a box like someone else is going to fix this. I don't know how to do this. And when I saw him smoking heroin on my living room floor, I was like, I can't deal with this. He's got to go to treatment. And as much as I thought I knew at this point, I had gone to meet him where he was. I thought I was being a good dad in that case to try to help him move to the next spot. Like you said, 2 steps forward, 1, 10, whatever steps back. It was tough. And at this point, it was now where he was close, within driving distance, within half hour at the most. And if he needed something, I was kind of willing to go. There was times that I even broke rules. Like I told him I would never bail him out of jail. You made the mistake. I am not bailing you out. And I did one time, and I don't know why. I got added to another contract I made with him to say he owed me another $100. But it was to make a point, and kind of out of my guilt too that I didn't hold my line. But I will tell you that being close didn't make it any easier. It made it harder.
That's interesting. That was going to be in my next question. I don't even know if easier is the right way, but maybe that's what I meant by control and influence, is being closer. Did it alleviate some of the other challenges is what I was trying to ask.
It was harder in the fact that being the passive person that I was, and in the other cases, he had other people around him, his mom, other people. I kind of could wash my hands of it and make a phone call, send some money. But now he's my responsibility. There's no one else around. It's me. And I remember he didn't ever want his picture taken with me, hardly ever. I don't know why, but I'd always sneak pictures so I could have a little bit of something to remember of our interactions, and just so I could remember anything, I would take pictures of a place he was staying, a vehicle he was driving, whatever it was. I would try to just connect in any way I could, so that anytime I had to talk to him, I would look at something that made me see where he was instead of the world I was running in. It was, I don't know how to say it. It's just, I was trying to connect in any way I could. And even just to go meet him somewhere to have a bagel or have a dinner or whatever I could. I mean, just, it was a lot. It was hard. I knew that he was trying. He wanted to succeed. But I still think he had that I'm going to succeed below the line mentality. And as he got deeper and deeper in his addiction, during COVID, it got pretty bad. And things were locked up. Things were different. Things were not the same. Things weren't open like they were before. And finding places to be on the streets was a lot harder. And he decided he wanted to go back to treatment. And he did. And he went through 90 days, got into sober living, was there for another 90 plus days. And somebody brought something in. He relapsed. They kicked him out. We found him another sober living and not having to go through treatment again. Went into that place. Was doing okay, I thought. Got a job, was doing really well. I was going and meeting him where he was working, bringing him food, for his lunches, and when he was close by where I worked, and not all the time, but just where he was. And one time I took him out to dinner, and he was talking about how great things were, but he was nodding off in the seat next to me, and I was like, boy, you must be working pretty hard. You're pretty tired. And I knew what was going on, but I just wanted him to admit it. I wasn't going to call him out on it. And he ended up getting in trouble, getting fired, losing his sober living house, sitting in my house. And one day he's sitting there and he's kind of despondent in this room. And I said, when you're ready to talk, I'll be out in my easy chair. And probably 30 minutes went by, and he came out and he was crying. He goes, Dad, I don't think I can make it. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, I don't think I'll live this time. And we had conversations in the past about things, and me kind of firing warning shots. I don't know how else to call it. Like, hey, bud, where do you want your funeral? He goes, Dad, I'm not going to die. And I'm like, bud, you've died many times already. And he said, I'm not gonna. I said, no, you have to give me some direction here. He goes, why? And I said, well, we live here. You grew up there. You have family there and family there. We're all across the country. And when I have to deal with you being gone, what do you want me to do? What's your wishes? That was a hard conversation, not gonna lie.
That is a hard conversation. You're getting to a point, to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, where you're almost trying to communicate to him. It's like, look, if you continue down this path, it's terminal, and we need to protect those around you, and we need to know your wishes, because that's ultimately what's going to happen. And that is a father talking to a son to try and protect the other people as well.
I love him for this quality. He's invincible. He will walk through fire. He is just that kind of guy. And I mean, I went to his arraignment one time, and I watched him up there, and when he got out, I said, let's go have some lunch. I'd love to have this talk with you. And he goes, Dad, I got out of jail or out of the hospital after overdosing. I had to ride a bike all the way across town, which was tens of miles, not just a couple of feet. And my phone was dead, so I went into a gas station to steal a charger. I got chased by a cop, and if I hadn't have died the night before, I would have beat him. I was like, do you hear yourself? Like,
Wow.
do you hear what you're saying? And that's where that's what I meant by this invincible attitude. That's where he was. So connecting even on the conversations about death didn't feel real to him. I don't think. I don't know. I wasn't him, but
at that point when he was crying, I think
he was vulnerable.
He knew it.
And he knew that this time he was, I don't know anything about the stuff he was taking, but I know that had I taken an eighth of what he's taking, I would have died. His levels of, what's that called, tolerance, were very high. And he knew that. He's very smart.
There's no doubt.
I am so in awe of his intelligence. And when he told me where he was, and I could see the fear in his eyes, it was hard for me to not say, how do I fix you, right? And we were sitting there probably, I don't know, it was probably a week before he went into treatment again. And all I could do was say, what's your plan? If you want to change, what's your plan? And I remember having these conversations with him, and his girlfriend was still around at the time, his old girlfriend. And I will tell you, that was the only reason he questioned whether or not he would go into treatment, was her. And I remember sitting at my kitchen table and pointing out to him exactly how they were codependent, how they were enabling each other, and how they both manipulated, but she was very manipulative in this. And I brought as much as I could to light whenever I could without being mean and pushing him out the door, because he would protect her over me and himself at any time. And it was just by chance I had to be out of town that Friday, and there was one rule I had, that you can't be in my house if I'm not there. And kind of along those same lines with don't steal from me, after the house that the guy said, we had your house on watch, I knew that I couldn't leave him alone in my house. There were some lines I had to draw. So I said, well, I'm leaving. You have to leave. You figure it out. Here's what I would do. You need to go into this treatment facility. I said, they've got short-term treatment, but I really encourage you to go for the year-long treatment. I said, at least. I said, what you've been in has been a long time. And like he said in his podcast, you can't expect somebody that's been doing it he hasn't 30, but 30 years, and to be healed in 30, 60, 90 days. That's true. So I said, what's your plan? He goes, well, I'm going to go into the short term. There's no way I'm hanging out in that place for a year. I'm like, okay, you do what you think is best for you. And so that day I left, he left, they went, and they were going to go check in, and I called him, and he called me, and he said, I'm here, but they don't have a bed. They won't have one till next week. They said if we come back Monday, Well, I'm completely out of town. I'm feeling like this absent father again, like I can't save my son, but I'm like, I couldn't save him anyway. Like, he's got to do this for himself. So that's all I talked about for that whole weekend, was every time I talked to him, like, what are you going to do? You wanted to get better. What are you going to do? And he chose to go into a detox facility, which was like going to prison, concrete seats and prison phones. And he stayed there for about 24 hours and was starting to detox and was having a big problem. He was hurting. And I said, well, you do what you think is best for you. But I said, if you check out, don't go have one last hurrah. If you want to maintain, I get it, but don't have one last hurrah and die on me this weekend. Basically what I said to him. And I don't know what got him through it, but Monday morning he went back to that treatment facility, checked himself in and said, the keys to the car are at the counter. Can you go park it at your house? We're going to be here a while. Like, yep. And he did. He stayed for almost a year. Like he said, she stayed for a few days, got her Suboxone or whatever it was, and checked out and went on her way. But he stayed. And I will tell you, that was a hard road too. It was a different hard road. I could see my son twice a week. They had I think there were 3-hour sessions of visitation every week.
Tell us what it's like with, we hear about them being healed, but what do they go through in that healing process? What happens, like, with their body, physically, mentally, after the initial 24, 48 hour, start of detox, like when they are actually back to having people around?
So I couldn't see him during the first part of that. All I've heard is stories. I mean, most of the stuff I hear is people walking in and saying, you're still alive? Like, he was bad. I don't know, but it's not something I can even fathom, that what he went through in detox. I'm sure he's done it more than once or twice, 4 or 5 times for sure. This time was probably the worst from what he sounded like. But I can't tell that story. That's his, but it's not something that I would want anybody to go through.
When you were able to actually see him, how was he different?
When he came off the drugs, he was very, I'd almost call it very distracted. I mean, very ADHD mind kind of. We'd have very short conversations about things, and he would see something and go in a different direction. He couldn't keep thoughts. For anybody that listened to the podcast last week, he speaks better than I do. He's very controlled in his conversation. He's very intelligent in the way he talks. He uses very intelligent words. When he was in treatment to begin with, we might have 30 seconds of conversation, and we might sit for 5 minutes with him trying to think of the next word. And it was just me being present. We would play games, throw bags, do whatever we could to kind of keep him occupied and thinking about things and having conversations on whatever we could. The beginning was hard to see the level of distance and the disconnection. And it probably took 3 to 5 months before we had true conversations where he was having legitimate memories and legitimate conversations. It was probably 8 to 9 months before we were talking like normal people. I don't know how to say it. It was very different. It was, my kid was back. I mean, it was.
The body's an amazing
Yes.
miracle working at that. If you imagine like what the body went through and then the brain to be able to come back from that, it's pretty spectacular.
It was amazing to see. And as much as I loved the facility he was in, it was faith-based, like he said. There was a lot of ritual to what they did. There was a lot of choir. It was, which I think was very helpful. If anybody's ever gone through EMDR therapy, where you connect the left and right brains of your brain, the left and right sides of your brain, connect the emotional with the logical and the physical, I think that plays a big part in how you heal. And prayer, Bible study, understanding things bigger than yourself is huge. If all you think is bigger than you is the government, it's a sad existence. And I think he found something bigger than himself, which I think he's always known. He just found something that he could grow in, and he started working out, becoming physically fit. And it was interesting to see him the first 6 months because he gained a lot of weight, and he was kind of happy about his dad bod for a little bit. It's pretty funny. Showing those pictures, he laughs at it now. But then he got really fit, and the transformation was amazing. Just to see him from the scrawny little, you see pictures of people on meth. He was skinny and just hard to look at. And he was now in a place where he was healthy, was muscular and full,
One of the questions I asked him was about identity. And he goes, not only get my body back, I got my identity back. And I think that's a huge thing. I have a tough one for you, though. Yeah, I'm getting a dirty look from you. It's like, how did you get your identity back throughout all this? Or is it a work in progress?
Oh, it's definitely a work in progress. My faith has played the biggest role in my identity because, as you talked about, generational curses, looking to earthly direction. Everybody's got their own bias. Everybody's got their own beliefs. Everybody's got their own ways they think you should live your life. And if there was anything I tried to do, it was not tell him how to live his life, but show him how should I say this? Show him maybe that life was worth living, and there's something bigger for you to accomplish than just succeeding in some way. Like, I thought that's what life was about when I was raising my kids. It was being successful, making enough money to get by, and I didn't do a good job at it. We weren't successful. We had just barely enough to get by in the world we live in, which is more than most. And my identity is in the things I want to serve.
That makes perfect sense.
I used to think about what I could accomplish, and I don't think about that as much anymore. Granted, everybody wants to be successful, but I'm in a new chapter of my life. Things have changed in the last few months for me personally, relationally, and I guess I'm working on that identity piece. I will say that this whole journey has taught me that my success, no matter what, monetarily, stuff wise, it doesn't really mean as much as, did I lead people well?
There you go.
Did I leave this world in a place where my kids are better because I was in it? Or was it like before, where I was just there, kind of?
You know, we could talk to you for probably 9 days, and I really do hope people do send in questions, because I know there are others out there that may go through very similar things. I was not going to bring this particular thing up, but it was brought up last week. And I think it ties in with your contracts. And that contract is do not steal from me. And he told a story about stealing from you. And I think it was, I'm just assuming it's your life. But to me, that seems like this catalyst turning point of something.
I've always been involved with men's groups. And we used to go to these fun things that we had a bunch of guys and their kids and boys up in the mountains or up in the hills or wherever, to picnics, to just whatever. And then when I moved, I got into places where he went to like retreats. And when he was in his last treatment, I told him about these retreats I was going. And when he was in treatment, I told him about retreats, and he always made fun of me like I was going to some bunch of guys getting together, sounding pretty weird to him. Like,
yeah.
And so when he finally got out of treatment, there was one that came up, and I asked him if he wanted to go. And he kind of was apprehensive, but he said, yeah. I said, well, you can't stay by yourself. I want you to go with me. So we went to this, and he got into these groups by himself. I wasn't in them. And they said, you have to come clean on something. And I'm sitting on the end of this dock and having a good time just in the sun, calm, water, relaxing. And he comes walking out like a sheep with his tail between his legs and just nervous and shaking. And I was like, what's going on, dude? And he goes, Dad, you know those 2 rules you had? I'm like, yeah. He goes, I broke one of them. And he was just about crying. And I said, well, seeing as you haven't hit me,
let's narrow it down.
I said, I'm pretty sure you took something from me. And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, the fact that I haven't seen it missing, I said, it probably didn't mean that much to me. So I said, what'd you take? And he goes, Dad, I pawned your wedding ring. And I tried not to laugh, but
I'm going to laugh a little bit. I'm sorry.
I said, dude, how much did you get for it?
Legitimate question.
And he said, probably $80, Dad. But I said, you're not giving me $80. He goes, that wasn't the point. And I said, it was kind of your final moment of rebellion. I said, there were some things that kind of was a catalyst to your life. And I could see where you were getting back at me on that one. I said, that one really isn't stealing from me. I said, that one is that I get. I said, much as I don't want you stealing from me, don't do it again. That one I get. And he kind of just see the weight come off of him. He'd been holding that one for a while. And I said, son, I love you.
Yeah.
I said, I get that one, you know.
Well, out of all the things to do it, I get it too. I get it too, man.
Yeah.
And when he said that, I had a little offline conversation about it. I'm like, to me, that was like a divine defining moment that neither one of you had any control over, and it just happened. And man, you could write a song about that. It's
good.
Yeah.
It's had a pretty good streak of like his sobriety. Now, do you think that the nightmare's finally over? You ever think, I know in the back of everybody's mind, they always think, oh man, relapse. What would it take to get them there? But do you think that he's healed enough mentally to where he could withstand something like that?
He talked about it as being a coping mechanism. I think we all struggle with our own, you can call them addictions, whatever those are.
Absolutely.
Whether they're food, whether it's TV, whether it's relational problems, whether it's
Porn.
Yep. I was going to say that. I was getting there, drinking, whatever it is.
You could have beef for that.
Oh, sorry. Gonna adjust your crown on your head.
Yes.
So vanity.
Vanity.
So I don't want to say that I worry about it. I can't say that I worry because I hope he and I in any way would surround ourselves and communicate with each other when we're struggling with something. And there's been a few times that he's called me and said, Dad, I found this. What are you going to do with it? It's like, I put it away. I told somebody else to go do something and I walked away, and I'm like, that's my guy. I know there's things in my life I struggle with. I quit drinking 5 years ago almost right now because of something he was walking through, and I saw something in me I didn't like, and I haven't done it since. And it's because I know it. I don't have, I wouldn't call it addiction to that, but it's something that if I can't walk that way, can he? Should I ask him? And I challenge myself. You walk around the town I live in, and you can't go a step without finding some sort of alcohol. And it's the way we live. And having those relationships built around that is tough in today's world.
Last tough question for you.
Sure.
Do you want to do it or should I? You're good
Go
at
ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a parent, to anyone listening out there, as the person you are, and learning and continuing to heal from what you're healing from, if you could give a bit of advice to someone, whether it be where to start or how to get through this, could you come? I don't think you can come up with one. I mean, but if there's one to start, maybe a starting point, so you get a little reprieve here.
No, I get the question you ask on every podcast.
They only get one, Dan.
Oh, sorry, but he's clearly a fan because he's heard this question before.
Sure.
As I said earlier, if there's one thing I could suggest is meet them where they are. Don't try to assume who they are, but I'll take that one step further and say meet yourself where you are, because that's where it all started for me, was understanding that I might have been the problem, or at least a piece of it. Whether I was the whole problem or not, I don't know. I'm going to take it as I was, so that I could say, what can I do different? And where am I right now? And where can I be later? So that's probably my biggest piece of this, was I had to be where I was and meet him where he was and make sure we understood each other. And then we walked forward and back a couple times, but we did it.
Man, I tell you, these past 2 weeks have changed my life. It's opened my eyes to so many things that I've never experienced firsthand, and I cannot thank you both enough for that. And I know you have a lot more to say, and we got nothing but time, baby. We'll do it another time, but well past Abby's bedtime.
It is, but
And
I loved hearing I think what I got out of this the most, I have a young son, and I can feel, what he's feeling, and I see the different things, and just on the daily conversations with my son, what I'm getting out of this and what they both craved was connection.
Connection.
Honest and true connection. not to where you lied about this or that, or, my little shit stole Oreos and shoved them under the sofa, which,
I've done that.
is it normal kid thing, that type of thing. But the connection that you two now have, and when I was asking the relapse question, I think he has that connection that he so desperately needed when he was an addict, that now he can call you and he can say, I left that. I walked away.
Because you met him where he was at.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a great way to end today.
Yeah, it is. Thank you so much. Let's talk offline. I got a lot more questions. Till next time. This one's gonna be a tough one to beat. I'm sorry. So come back and talk to us again in the future, please.
I'd love to.
All right.
You've been listening to the Kiss My Chaos podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we speak with some of the most intriguing people about their journey from trauma to triumph. If you find yourself in mental crisis, please seek professional medical help immediately.